a regal structure that seemed to touch the skis itself. The Agnihotris were not just royalty by blood, but by presence. The mansion breathed power. Rupali Agnihotri flitted from room to room, arranging things with her usual grace. She was kind, despite the burden of being the queen mother of a palace slowly transforming into a business empire. "Is the sitting area ready, Rekha?" she asked her sister-in-law. Yes, let's hope they impress," Rekha replied with a smug smile, clearly not thrilled by the idea. Upstairs, standing on the second-floor corridor that overlooked the main entrance, Angad Agnihotri paused as he caught sight of Vidhi entering the mansion. She looked beautiful in a simple rose-pink suit, her eyes scanning the interior with awe and nervousness. But Angad, he wasn't prepared. His heart slammed against his ribs. Why is she here? Why didn't she tell me her name was Verma? And then came the hit. This was the girl his family had chosen for Hridhaan. Something primal flared in his chest. Confusion, anger, pain. Why was he feeling any of this? He turned away sharply, jaw clenched. He wasn't allowed to feel anything. Not for a girl who was meant for someone else. Downstairs, Vidhi met the Agnihotris with poise, unaware of the burning gaze watching her from above. Priya smiled gracefully at Rupali, exchanging pleasantries. "Your daughter is very beautiful," Rupali said warmly. "And from what Varun tells me, your family has always held its grace. We would be honored." Randhir nodded in agreement. "We believe this alliance will be good for both families." But Vidhi's hands felt cold. What she heard earlier was still echoing in her head. "You'll get used to his absence. He's not the kind who attends such formalities." And upstairs, Angad's world tilted slightly, because his heart had made a quiet rebellion without his permission. A day before, the morning sun bathed Udaipur in golden hues, casting its warmth over the sprawling Verma mansion. Birds chirped in the distance, and the rhythmic sounds of temple bells floated gently through the air. But for Aavya Verma, mornings were never about new beginnings. They were just another day in the echo of her silence. She sat on the swing in the backyard, her diary nestled in her lap, fingers tracing the edges of the last page she had written. Words always listened to her, even when people didn't. That diary held her world, her dreams, her sadness, and the poetry she never dared share with anyone. "Rianu Dema," she whispered softly, as the old caretaker placed a shawl on her shoulders. "Why do I always feel like I'm floating outside this family, like a guest no one invited?" Rianu Dema sat beside her, eyes brimming with affection and pain. "Because Beta, this house was built for appearances, not bonds. But your soul is deeper than all the walls combined." Aavya smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm happy Vidhi is getting the proposal of such a royal family. She deserves it. She's always been the pride of this house. I'm just here." Dema held her hand tightly. "Don't say that. You are the soul of this house, Aavya. Maybe unseen, but without you it would collapse from within." Meanwhile, inside the drawing room of the Verma mansion, a different world thrived. Vidhi sat quietly as Randhir Verma and Priya discussed the upcoming meeting with the Agnihotri family. Her eyes flickered nervously from one to the other. Her mind was in chaos. "Priya," Randhir said, taking a sip of his tea, "you do realize this is not just a marriage proposal. This is an alliance. Varun Agnihotri is not just a businessman. He's the face of Udaipur's legacy." Priya nodded calmly, arranging bangles on her wrist. "And they are asking for Vidhi's hand for Hridhaan, their eldest son, the next king, quite literally." "But does Vidhi even want this?" she asked, finally turning to her daughter. Same question again. Vidhi's heart skipped a beat. I didn't expect it, Ma. It's a lot. I mean, they don't even know me. And She paused, hesitant to reveal her connection with Angad, a man she had met as a stranger who made her laugh, made her think, made her feel, noticed. But she couldn't say a word. Not yet. "I am confused. I need time," she said finally, managing a composed smile. "Can I go to my room?" Priya nodded. As Vidhi walked out, her smile faded and her fingers instinctively reached for her phone. A message from Angad blinked. "Hope your day is less complicated than mine." She stared at it, torn. Back in the mansion, Aavya walked past them like a ghost. She wasn't invited to the discussion. No one asked her opinion. No one even acknowledged her presence. She was the living memory of a love her father wanted to forget. And yet she bore no anger, just silence. It was a quiet morning at the university. The sky was heavy with soft clouds, casting a mild shadow over the lush, green campus. Aavya sat beneath the neem tree in the literature courtyard, her diary open on her lap, pen twirling in her fingers. College was the only place where she didn't feel like a ghost. No one here knew her truth. No one here saw her as a shadow of the Verma family. Here she was just Aavya, the quiet girl who always wrote in corners, who smiled gently at strangers, who left before anyone could get too close. She looked up at the soft rustling of leaves, trying to find the words for a poem that wouldn't come. Her mind was still at home, with Vidhi, with the Agnihotris proposal, with the feeling of being left out again. She had heard Dama and Vinu whispering about the grandeur of the Agnihotris mansion, the royalty of it all. She smiled bitterly. Another celebration she wasn't part of. Just then, a notebook fell in front of her. She blinked and looked up. A boy stood there, awkwardly handsome with messy hair and kind eyes. "Sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I am late." Aavya smiled slightly and handed him the notebook. He noticed her open diary and smiled back. "You wrote your poetry." She hesitated. "Mostly I just tried." He sat down a few feet away, pulling out his pen. "Well, you already know I'm terrible at poems. Always feel like I'm missing the soul in them. Maybe you could help me with this assignment." Aavya looked at him, a little surprised. "You want my help?" He chuckled. "Why not?" She tilted her head curiously. "You always give me suggestions, and you think that qualifies me to write your poetry." He smirked, then extended his hand and ruffled her hair. "Of course." She shook it gently, heart skipped a beat. "Angad." Just that. Two strangers, a quiet connection. The next hour melted away in laughter and brainstorming and talking about metaphors and heartbreak and healing. Angad, for all his royal blood, didn't act entitled. He didn't mention his surname. Neither did she, ever. It was perfect that way. And yet, something stirred in Aavya's chest when he laughed. She laughed too, a soft, hesitant sound that didn't reach many. Angad saw something about her sadness that intrigued him. He couldn't explain it, but he wanted to see her smile again. She felt like a person with depth. Somewhere else in London. In a tall corporate building lit by the dusky hues of evening, a man stood facing the large window. He was tall, his frame sculpted from discipline and wrath, broad shoulders. His hands were resting in his pockets, sharp jaw, hazel brown eyes, distant, unreadable. There was something stormy about him, a quiet fire, a ruthless intensity, the kind of man who walked into a room and froze time. He didn't speak unless necessary, and when he did, people listened. The phone buzzed. "Varun, son, today we met a girl for your alliance. Her name is Vidhi Verma." His eyes flickered for a second, but he said nothing, just stared out at the fatting skyline of Udaipur. Because hearts never moved him. Only power did. Or so he thought. That evening, Agnihotris mansion. Rika Agnihotris' voice echoed in the hallway. "So the proposal went well?" she asked, slicing mangoes a little too aggressively. Rupali smiled patiently. "Vidhi is a lovely girl, graceful, respectful. She reminded me of Masa when I first came here as Bahu." Rika scoffed. "And what did Hridhaan say?" Rupali's expression dropped just slightly. "Nothing. As usual, he's unreadable, always distant. He said he'd think about it." Vijay, sitting quietly nearby, looked at his wife with a warning glance. "Let it go, Rika. Don't start now." But Rika ignored him. "You know what the real problem is," she muttered under her breath. "That boy is nothing but a storm bottled up, and storms destroy everything. Upstairs, Angad entered his room and flopped onto the bed, pulling out his phone. Aavya, thank you for today. It was the first time I didn't feel invisible. He stared at the screen for a long time, then typed. Angad, I don't think someone like you could ever be invisible. The world just doesn't know how to look properly. He hesitated, then hit send. Downstairs, Varun stood by the fireplace, speaking quietly to his wife. Rupali, something's off with Hridhaan lately. He's become even more withdrawn. He didn't even react when I told him about Vidhi. Rupali's eyes turned sad and rage for her husband. Because he has locked his emotions somewhere so deep, even I can't reach them. Sometimes, I fear he's punishing himself for something none of us understands. And you played a major part in shaping him to be a king. You forgot that he is your son, keeping him away from home for days, and now he has forgotten that he has a home. Varun placed a hand on her shoulder, jaw clenched. I just hope one day someone cracks that wall. I want Vidhi to be that person. She sighed sadly with tears in her eyes. That someone must be extraordinary. Meanwhile, at the Verma mansion, Vidhi sat with her phone in her hand, staring at the contact name, Angad. Her fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't type anything. Because she couldn't. How could she talk to him now that she knew who he was? That he belonged to the same family proposing marriage for her, but to someone else. And she didn't even know how she felt about any of it. She was caught between a polite alliance and a silent bond. And worst of all, Aavya wasn't talking much anymore. Her sister had grown quieter, and Vidhi couldn't figure out why. In truth, Aavya had buried the ache of being forgotten again. No one told her about the meeting with the Agnihotris. No one even asked her to come. She wasn't surprised. She had learned not to expect anything. Only Rianu Dema's gentle arms gave her warmth. Late night, a rooftop in London. A tall figure stood in the darkness of a deserted terrace, city lights twinkling below. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand, the other resting against the cold railing. He didn't speak, he didn't move much. But his presence was like a magnet to shadows, cold, commanding, dangerous. His hazel eyes glinted under the moonlight. Rage slept behind them, controlled, waiting. He stared ahead, unblinking. Because he knew something had shifted. A name. A proposal. A girl he hadn't even seen. And yet something inside him felt, threatened. Unsettled. A glimpse of the shad. Late that night, a man stepped into the marble-floored corridor of the Agnihotri Haveli. Tall, sharp-suited, his steps echoed power. He stood before the full-length mirror, removing his cufflinks with precise, slow movements. His hazel eyes met his reflection, but they weren't warm. They were cold, distant, like they had seen too much and felt too little. His name was never spoken aloud that day. But his presence was felt, like a chill in the air, like thunder before the storm. He didn't know it yet, but his story had already begun. And it had started with a girl who hadn't even entered his world. Aavya. The morning came gently, like it always did. But for Aavya, it didn't matter whether the sun rose or not. Light was never something she needed from the sky. It was something she searched for inside herself, every day, just to keep breathing in a house that never remembered to say her name. In the Verma mansion's dining hall, Vidhi sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, lost in her own world. Priya poured tea only for her and Randhir, and spoke in hushed tones about the grandeur of Agnihotri Haveli. Rupali Jai is so graceful, she smiled. And the decor, Vidhi, you'd be a queen there. Vidhi looked up slowly. I still need some time to think. Randhir grunted behind his newspaper. There is nothing to think. They liked you. We'll move forward with the talks. But Papa... No buts, Vidhi. This is the Agnihotris we're talking about. One of the most powerful families in the country. Vidhi went silent. No one noticed that Aavya was sitting at the far end of the table, eating her toast without butter, her eyes on the floor, her ears catching every word. But her name wasn't in the conversation. As usual. She quietly picked up her plate and walked away. The college campus, a different life. The campus was alive with noise, color, and the buzz of youth. Aavya's department was tucked into the quieter side of the building, where literature bloomed like wildflowers in forgotten corners. She found her favorite bench under the banyan tree, took out her journal, and began scribbling poetry. My voice is soft, so the world forgot it had a sound. Again, writing something deep and devastating. Aavya looked up, and her lips curved into a small smile. Angad. He stood there in a simple white shirt and jeans, a notebook in one hand, and a confused look on his face. His usual confidence had melted into a casual awkwardness around her. Just thoughts, she murmured, not poems. You always say that. He said, sitting beside her without invitation, and yet every time I read them they feel like truths I've never been brave enough to speak. Aavya looked at him, truly looked at him. There was something in Angad, something calm but chaotic, like he was trying to escape a storm inside by pretending it didn't exist. I guess I'm not brave enough to speak them either, she said softly. Their eyes met. For a moment, silence did all the talking. Inside the Agnihotris Haveli. Agnihotris was packing inside her room, frustrated. How can Varun decide without consulting anyone? She hissed. This girl is from a mediocre business family. She's Randhir Verma's daughter, Vijay said calmly from the sofa, flipping through some reports. He's smart, and the girl is decent. You're always ready to support your brother, aren't you? She snapped. Vijay looked up, because he's always been right. Rakaf fumed. He's marrying his son into a lower family, and you're nodding your head like a servant. Lower family, a new voice entered. It was Rupali, her tone soft but eyes fierce. Wealth can be earned, values can't, and I saw honesty in that girl's eyes. Rika rolled hers. You and your soft heart, Gigi. No, Rupali said, folding her hands. Just a mother hopping for someone in this house to bring life into that stone-hearted elder son of mine. There was a long pause. And in the hallway, unnoticed, that very son stood, listening. Hazel eyes staring into nothing, jaw tense, hands behind his back. His heart was no longer a stone. It was a volcano, waiting. Back home, Dama found Aavya staring into her empty bookshelf. Looking for something, she asked. A story where the unknown child gets to be seen, Aavya said with a tired smile. Dama's heart broke a little more. You're not unseen to me. I know, Aavya said, her voice a whisper. But sometimes, being loved quietly isn't enough. I want someone to say my name like it means something. Dama reached out and gently stroked her hair. Someone will. One day, your name will be on someone's breath like a prayer. I promise. Back in his private quarters at the Agnihotris Haveli, Angad sat on his bed, rereading old messages. The girl he had been texting all this time, Vidhi Verma. But now everything was twisted. He had met Aavya, and without knowing why, he found himself waiting for her smile, her presence, her little nods, her silences. But she was not the girl his brother might marry. She was someone else entirely. Or so he thought. Far across the city, behind the cold, tinted glass of a towering office skyscraper, he stood. The man everyone feared. The eldest Agnihotris son. Hridhaan. He stared at a file on his desk, Vidhi Verma's details. His staff had compiled everything. Her schooling, her family, her hobbies. But he wasn't interested in any of it. He flipped it shut, then walked to the window. His mind wasn't on her. It wasn't about marriage. It wasn't even in the present. It was chasing something he couldn't name, a feeling far away, one that didn't belong in his world. And yet, it had already begun to poison it. The heavy curtains of the Agnihotris estate shimmered golden under the late afternoon sun. The air was thick with tension behind the tall mahogany doors of Varun Agnihotris' study. Silence hung between the father and son like a drawn sword. Hridhaan Agnihotris stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, arms crossed over his chest, face angled away from his father. His towering frame, dressed sharply in a tailored black suit, radiated power and stillness, like a volcano before eruption. His hazel-brown eyes stared into the distance, yet there was a restless storm behind them. "I said no, Dad," he said, voice low but unwavering. Varun didn't flinch. He sat at his desk, eyes stern and hands folded. "And I'm not asking you for your permission, Hridhaan. I'm telling you what's best for this family." "I've given everything to this family," Hridhaan turned, his voice now edged with ice. "I've given my time, my vision, my strength. I am building an empire across continents while you sit here plotting my marriage like it's a business merger." "Because it is one," Varun slammed his palm on the table. "You are the next face of the Agnihotris. The Varmas have power, old royal blood. Their presence in Rajasthan is not just political, it's social. If Vidhi becomes your wife, we don't just gain a daughter-in-law, we gain an alliance." "I don't need a soft-spoken doll I can tame like your generation thinks," Hridhaan snapped. "I don't need a wife. Not now. Not for years." Varun exhaled sharply. "You can't live your life nursing rage and building walls. That's not strength, that's fear." "I don't fear anything," Hridhaan said, eyes flashing with something dangerous, something buried deep. "Then prove it. Commit. Settle down. Take responsibility not just for your empire, but for your legacy." A bitter laugh escaped Hridhaan's lips. "Legacy?" He turned and walked toward the door. "My only legacy will be this: blood on my hands, fire in my chest, and silence in my bones." And with that, he walked out. Later that day, Agnihotri Mansion courtyard. The warmth of the sun had faded by the time Sankalp Rathod arrived with his wife Arti and their little daughter, Mithai. The presence of Sankalp always grounded Hridhaan. The man wasn't just his best friend, he was his only anchor to a normal life. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," Sankalp remarked as they sat near the marble fountain. "Sleep is a luxury I've long forgotten," Hridhaan muttered, sipping his black coffee. Arti watched her husband exchange a quiet glance with Hridhaan, then took Mithai away to give them space. "Vidhi's proposal, huh?" Sankalp finally spoke. Hridhaan didn't respond. Sankalp chuckled softly. "I know that silence, you're running." "I'm not running," Hridhaan said quietly. "I'm just not ready." "Brother, you think a woman's going to chain you? You need someone who knows how to love what's left of you, not fix you, but stay with you in the wreckage." "I've seen what love does. I've seen what it ruins," Hridhaan said, his voice darker now. "And I'm not letting anyone inside just to watch them walk away." Sankalp didn't argue, he just patted Hridhaan's shoulder. "You'll know when it's time. The right one won't knock. She'll barge in. She'll burn everything down." Same day, college campus, Udaipur. The afternoon breeze danced through the open corridors of Udaipur Arts and Business College. Aavya sat on the stone bench beneath the peepal tree, her poetry notebook resting on her lap. She stared at the page, fingers frozen over her pen. "You write like your soul has seen a war," came a voice. She looked up Angad. She smiled softly. "Maybe it has." He sat beside her without invitation, as he always did these days. There was something about Aavya that pulled him in. Her silence wasn't hollow, it was heavy. She never tried to impress, to please, to speak more than needed. She was peace in the loudest of places. "You're writing again?" he asked. She nodded. "I hope today's not about pain," he smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "It's always about pain," she whispered, looking ahead. He paused. "You know I don't understand poetry, but when you read it, I feel things I can't explain." She smiled faintly. "That's poetry." For Angad, she was like a fragile painting hanging in a room full of noise, untouched, unnoticed, but deeply moving. He didn't see her as a romantic interest. He just felt a strange need to be near her, to protect her, to understand those eyes that never smiled the way her lips did. Just then, Vidhi's name flashed on his phone screen. He stared at it. He didn't answer. That evening, Agnihotri Mansion. The Varmas arrived in all grace. Randhir, Priya, and Vidhi stood in the grand drawing room of the Agnihotri Haveli. Priya wore a soft pastel sari, and Vidhi looked stunning yet nervous in a sky-blue salwar suit. Her eyes wandered, searching. Angad noticed her from the second-floor balcony. The moment his eyes fell on her, a sudden storm brewed inside him. Vidhi. She looked different in this light, softer. Not the confident, flirtatious woman he texted, but someone real, someone vulnerable. His heart skipped. His fists clenched. Why? Why was she here? Why did her presence hit him like a wave of confusion? And why did it bother him that her eyes were not searching for him? Because they were here for his brother. The real heir, the shadow that stood above them all. He turned away, biting his inner cheek, suppressing an emotion he didn't understand yet, but it wasn't love. It was something far darker. Something like possession. Meanwhile, Aavya was at home, seated in her small garden with her notebook again. She wasn't called to the Agnihotris gathering, and she didn't expect to be. She never was. She was a ghost in the Verma house, visible, but never seen. Dema walked to her with a cup of tea. You know, Besa, sometimes the ones not invited are the ones fate is saving for something bigger, Dema said warmly. Aavya looked up and smiled. And sometimes we're just not meant to belong. Dema's eyes misted. Maybe, but the wind changes before we know it. One day you'll stop being the silence in the room and become the thunder everyone fears. The warm sunlight crept into Aavya's room, touching the faded edges of her notebook. Her pen rested against the unfinished verse, and her fingers lingered over a line she had written last night. Some storms live within us, and we just call it silence. It was always like this for Aavya. Each morning was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that echoed, the kind that made her feel like a forgotten book on a dusty shelf. The voices downstairs of Vidhi laughing, Priya calling out breakfast orders, and Randhir's occasional sharp commands were distant, as if they belonged to someone else's family. She moved to the mirror, brushing her long hair slowly, mechanically. Her phone buzzed. Angad, coffee between lectures today. You promised to show me your favorite cafe. A small smile tugged at her lips. That boy. He had slowly become a gentle rhythm in her otherwise chaotic thoughts. Campus, late morning. Angad was waiting under the old banyan tree, where yellow leaves danced down in the August breeze. Aavya approached, dressed in simple jeans and a white kurta, her hair left open, her presence soft but haunting. You're late, he teased. I was writing, she replied, her voice gentle like a slow melody. You should publish a book someday, you know that. I'm not writing to be read, she smiled faintly. I'm writing to breathe. He paused. You're unlike anyone I've met. A silence stretched between them, not awkward but thoughtful. They walked to the cafe near the campus gate. Inside, she ordered chai, he got black coffee. They sat by the window. I want to ask you something, he said after a beat. She looked up. Why do you always look like you're hiding something? She blinked. I mean, it's not judgment, he added quickly. It's just, I see it in your eyes, like there's a whole life behind them and no one ever bothered to ask. Her fingers tightened around her teacup. She looked out the window. Some people are born to be secrets. I think I'm one of them. He studied her. Well, I like secrets, makes life less boring. She chuckled softly, sipping her tea. Neither of them knew that the very foundation of their connection rested on a lie they hadn't even discovered yet. Agnihotris Mansion, evening. Hridhaan was in his personal gym, throwing punches into the sandbag with blistering speed. Sweat rolled down his neck, jaw clenched, eyes focused, but unfocused at the same time. Every punch landed with the weight of unsaid rage. He didn't understand this new chaos within him. Why did Vidhi's presence disturb him? Why was he restless after just one glance? His phone rang. It was Sankalp again. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled off his gloves, grabbed a towel, and stormed into the shower. Verma Mansion, later that night. Vidhi lay on her bed, scrolling through her chat with the same who had once told her about how peace wasn't in finding someone perfect, but someone real. The person who always replied with thoughtfulness. Who once said, "You are more than the princess they see, you're a storm trapped in velvet." And now he was ghosting her. She sent another message. "I'm sorry if I've upset you. Are you okay?" No reply. She turned and buried her face in her pillow. The proposal, the Agnihotris, it was all too much. Her father was glowing with pride, her mother planning a future, and Vidhi. Vidhi was spiraling. Angad sat on the edge of his bed, Aavya's notebook open on his lap. She had forgotten it at the cafe, and he hadn't told her yet. His eyes moved over her lines. "My hands never held a rose without cutting a finger. And my heart never loved without cracking a bone." He shut the notebook gently, placing it on the table. "She's too delicate," he whispered, "too broken." He didn't know why he felt protective of her. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But something about Aavya made him feel like she needed someone to shield her, not because she was weak, but because she had been too strong for too long. Next day, college gates. Aavya walked up the stairs, finding Angad waiting with her notebook in hand. "You left this," he said, holding it out. She blushed. "You read it." "Some," he admitted. "Hope you don't mind." "I don't." He walked beside her quietly. "You're not like the others," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "You don't look at me like I'm invisible." "You're not," he replied. For the first time, Aavya felt seen. Agnihotri mansion, that afternoon. The drawing room was filled again. Randhir and Varun discussed the engagement, while Priya and Rupali talked over design themes. Vidhi walked through the hallway with heavy steps. Her eyes lifted instinctively, and there he was. Hridhaan, at the top of the staircase, leaning on the railing, staring down at her. Their eyes met. Her heart stopped. So did his. She didn't blink. He stared. It wasn't romantic, no. It was war. Of confusion. Of questions. Of strange, buried intensity neither of them could name. Then his eyes darkened, and he turned and walked away without a word, leaving Vidhi shaken. Meanwhile, Aavya. She returned home quietly, walking through the grand Verma mansion unnoticed, as usual. She passed the laughing voices of her so-called family and reached her room. She sat on her bed, opened her notebook, wrote one line. Sometimes, the loudest love story is the one no one even knows is beginning. And somewhere in Udaipur, Hridhaan sat in his silent bedroom, not knowing that the girl he hadn't met yet, the girl he would someday burn the world for, had already written the first word of his fate.